Simply economics, big ideas made small. Everyday money talk for any mind at all. Simply economics, learn fast, feel smart. One quick listen and you're ready to start.
Imagine waking up, getting dressed and heading out to your absolute favorite neighborhood cafe.
Right. Just a normal morning.
Exactly. Your usual morning routine. You walk up to the counter and you're met with a sign that just says, "Sorry, no lattes today."
Oh, the worst way to start a day.
It really is. And the thing is, it's not because a sudden plague wiped out the local dairy cows. And, the barista didn't just forget to put in the weekly order.
Right. It's usually something way more complicated.
Exactly. You are holding an empty cup because somewhere, far, far upstream, a tiny, almost invisible gear in a massive logistical machine just slipped.
Yeah, just one little slip.
So have you ever wondered why, when a crisis hits, suddenly everyone runs out of the exact same basic item at the exact same time?
Leaving aisles completely bare across, 3 different stores.
Yes. Today, our mission is to unpack exactly how that happens. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating document called The Bullwhip Effect, a coffeetown supply chain crisis.
It's such a great read.
It really is. It uses this fictional, self-contained cafe economy to unpack some massive, highly volatile, real-world economic ideas.
Yeah, and the beauty of the coffeetown model is how it perfectly isolates the mechanics of a shortage.
Right.
I mean, when you strip away the massive container ships and the, international customs checkpoints, the structural vulnerabilities of a local coffee shop map perfectly onto the operations of a multinational corporation.
It's all the same fundamental mechanics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the baseline state at this count is highly coordinated. It operates on a really strict just-in-time delivery rhythm. Farms output to processors, processors feed distributors, and the distributors run these incredibly tight delivery routes to the cafes.
And because milk spoils, right? It's a highly perishable biological product.
Yep, exactly. Holding excess inventory isn't just, tying up working capital. It introduces the high probability of total product loss through spoilage.
Which means the biological constraint essentially forces the operational strategy. Cafes can't act like hardware stores, just hoarding extra nails in a back room. They have to run lean, relying on very frequent, smaller deliveries. But then, according to the source, the inciting incident that shatters this whole equilibrium is, it's dangerously mundane.
It really is just a minor thing.
Yeah, a minor refrigeration failure hits a nearby dairy processor. It's literally just a temporary mechanical glitch that slows down their processing for a couple of days.
Right, and the processors just communicate this slight delay down to the distributors.
So what do the distributors do?
Well, they look at the delay, and they make a very rational, localized calculation. They basically assume the processor will have the compressor fixed by the weekend.
So they don't freak out.
Exactly. They don't sound a town-wide alarm. Instead, they just implement a minor rationing protocol. They trim their outgoing deliveries to the cafes, but just a tiny fraction.
Just to stretch their current inventory across the gap.
Right. And in a purely mathematical model of inventory routing, this is a very smooth logical adjustment.
But mathematical models often fail to account for human psychology, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, it is.
Especially at the point of sale.
Because that downstream psychological impact is exactly where the chaos starts.
Yeah. It really is.
When the delivery truck drops off a slightly smaller crate of milk, the cafe shelf just looks a little thinner.
Just a visual cue.
Right, a visual cue of scarcity. Customers walk in, they notice it, and their behavior instantly shifts. The document points out that regular customers start ordering larger sizes or buying an extra drink for a coworker before the milk runs out.
Yeah, they anticipate a shortage, and by acting on that anticipation, they actually manifest the shortage.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because the compounding effect here is staggering.
Yeah.
It's basically like a traffic jam caused by one single person lightly tapping their brakes on the highway.
Right, just a tap.
Yeah, that one driver slows down just a fraction to look at something, but the driver behind them is caught off guard, so they brake a little harder.
And then the next person slams on their brakes.
Exactly. By the time that chain reaction reaches the cars a mile back down the highway, everyone is at a complete frustrating standstill.
All because of a 2-second deceleration miles ahead.
Right. It's wild.
It is. And the terminology operations managers use for this specific type of economic traffic jam is the bullwhip effect.
The bullwhip effect.
Yeah. It describes how small fluctuations in demand at the retail level create progressively larger, much more violent swings further up the supply chain.
Hence the whip analogy.
Exactly. The source document uses the physical mechanics of a whip to illustrate it. If you hold the handle of a bullwhip and give your wrist a tiny, subtle flick,
Just a small movement.
right, just a flick, that kinetic energy travels down the leather and it amplifies as the mass of the whip tapers until it reaches the tip, breaking the sound barrier and creating a massive, violent crack.
Wow. Let's map that kinetic energy through the Coffeetown ecosystem because it tracks perfectly.
Let's do it.
So the handle of the whip is the customer base. That slight uptick in panic, like ordering a venti instead of a grand because the shelf looked a little empty. That's the tiny flick of the wrist.
Right.
Then we move one step up the whip to the cafes. The managers look at their depleted stock and they assume this new elevated demand is a permanent thing.
They think it's the new baseline.
Yes. So when they call the distributor for the next delivery, they don't just order their normal amount, they double the order to build a buffer.
And that's where the distortion amplifies.
Yeah.
Because the distributor receives those double purchase orders from like 20 different cafes simultaneously.
Wow. Yeah.
Now we're further down the whip. The distributor doesn't have visibility into the fact that this is just a temporary consumer panic. They rely entirely on order volume as their sole demand signal.
So they just see a 100% increase across the board.
Exactly. Seeing that, the distributor assumes a massive market shift is happening across the whole town. So they consolidate these inflated numbers and place an exponentially larger order with the dairy processors.
Which brings us to the tip of the whip.
Yep.
The processors are still literally trying to fix their broken refrigeration issue, and suddenly their inbound order system lights up with gigantic, unprecedented demand from the distributors.
Pure chaos.
Right. The processors think there is a systemic explosion in the consumption of dairy. Chaos ensues.
And to meet this phantom demand, they might, authorize expensive overtime or lease emergency equipment.
All based on a mirage.
Entirely a mirage. The core issue here is information asymmetry. Each node in the supply chain is acting in a complete silo. They are reacting only to the orders placed by the node immediately adjacent to them, rather than the actual organic consumer demand at the cash register.
Which creates a catastrophic forecasting trap.
It really does.
And the source outlines the math of this forecasting trap perfectly. Let's look at the baseline numbers they give. A cafe normally orders exactly 100 gallons of milk per week. That's their manageable baseline.
Right, a baseline that allows for highly optimized efficiency. They only pay for what they need.
But then the panic hits. Sales jump, the manager recalculates, and they order 180 gallons for the next week.
A huge jump.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Wait, so these businesses are essentially tricking themselves.
In a way, yes.
I mean, they are throwing away money because they're treating a temporary human panic as if it's a permanent shift in reality. Are they just ignoring their own historical data?
What's fascinating here is that they aren't ignoring the data at all. They are actually falling victim to the very algorithms designed to protect them.
Wait, really? The algorithms cause it?
Yeah. Most forecasting models use forms of exponential smoothing, which inherently give much heavier weight to recent data points than older ones. The math is designed to adapt to new trends fast.
Oh, I see.
So when variance spikes, when 100 gallons jumps to 150, the algorithm recommends a massive order to cover the newly perceived risk. They're just following the math.
The math is chasing a ghost.
Okay.
Because a few days later, the panic fades. Customer demand drops right back to normal. But the cafe now has 180 gallons of milk sitting in a fridge built for 100.
And the clock is ticking on those expiration dates.
Right. The milk spoils, and the cafe loses money. They suffer a total write-off.
The financial damage is twofold there. You have the opportunity cost of the initial stockouts, followed immediately by the destruction of the spoiled overstock. The system oscillates violently.
It's wild. Which leads directly to the question, if the underlying systems create this much vulnerability, why are they built to be so fragile in the first place?
That is the big question. And the source document points directly to the concept of lean inventory systems.
Lean inventory.
Yeah, or just-in-time manufacturing. The whole objective is to ruthlessly eliminate any asset that is not actively generating value. Holding inventory means lower storage costs, less waste, higher efficiency.
Because the capital isn't trapped in boxes in a stockroom.
Right, it's liquid.
But as we see in Coffeetown, there's a dark side to being lean. The source makes it clear that when the environment is perfectly stable, lean systems are amazing. highly profitable.
Breathtakingly profitable.
But the trade-off is terrifying fragility. If deliveries slow down even briefly, businesses run out of product immediately.
Because the margin for error approaches zero.
Mm-hmm.
A lean system operates without any shock absorbers.
Right. So in Coffeetown, cafes are forced into grim survival choices. They have to ration milk, raise prices, limit drink sizes, switch suppliers, or just close early.
And the source highlights that the cafes relying entirely on one distributor were hit the absolute hardest.
Yeah.
They traded all their resilience for a tiny margin improvement.
So what does this all mean for you? It's basically like packing for a long trip with absolutely zero extra room in your suitcase just to save on the baggage fees.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Right, like you optimize every square inch. It's a super efficient strategy right up until you spill coffee on your only shirt. And then suddenly, your brilliant efficiency becomes a total disaster because you have no backup.
Exactly. Your suitcase analogy really hit at the core thesis here. Efficiency and resilience are not the same thing.
They aren't synonyms.
Not at all. A system optimized for low cost is almost never optimized for survival. They are inversely correlated.
So if the hyper-efficient way is fundamentally too fragile, how do businesses fix it? How do they actually survive the next crisis?
Well, the source outlines 4 specific pillars operations managers use to design resilience back into these networks.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is diversification. Working with multiple suppliers across different regions so there's always a backup.
Don't put all your beans in one basket.
Exactly. In Coffeetown, a resilient cafe splits their volume. If the primary route goes down, the secondary route is already active.
Makes total sense.
The second pillar is better information sharing. You have to attack the information asymmetry to dismantle the bullwhip effect.
So how do they do that?
By using modern tech to track real-time demand. APIs that push actual point-of-sale data up the chain instantly.
Meaning, when the barista scans a carton of milk, that data goes straight to the dairy farm's dashboard.
Yes, so the processors can see that consumer-level consumption hasn't actually spiked, and they can ignore the panic purchase orders. It stops the cycle.
Wow. Okay, what's the third pillar?
The third is safety stock, keeping intentional extra inventory as an insurance policy.
But hold on, didn't we just establish that milk spoils quickly? How does safety stock actually work for perishables without just creating that exact same waste and financial loss we talked about earlier? You can't just hoard raw milk.
This raises a really important question,
Yeah.
and it forces businesses to look at the fourth pillar, which is flexibility.
Flexibility.
Right. You can't buffer the raw perishable good, so you have to buffer the demand itself. Resilience for a cafe isn't about having a secret vault of milk.
Okay.
It's about being able to adapt menus, change ingredients, or swap suppliers on the fly.
Ah, I see. So if the standard dairy delivery fails, they don't just put up a sold-out sign.
Exactly. They immediately pivot. They run a heavy promotion for oat milk lattes or offer a discount on black cold brew.
They dynamically shape the customer demand to fit the inventory they actually possess.
Precisely. The businesses that survive shocks are often not the cheapest or the fastest. They are the most adaptable.
That is fascinating. This whole deep dive really shifts how you look at a morning routine.
It really does.
Let's summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening. We've seen how a microscopic upstream disruption causes massive downstream consequences.
Because fear and psychology amplify shortages.
Right. And poor forecasting creates instability, and unchecked lean efficiency increases fragility.
So next time you order a latte, just look at the cup and realize there is an entire, highly sensitive global system working behind it. Stability doesn't just happen automatically, it has to be deliberately designed.
Which leaves us with a final, really provocative thought to mull over. If stability has to be deliberately designed, and true resilience costs far more than lean efficiency,
Which it does.
does that mean you, as a consumer, ultimately have to choose?
Oh, that's the big question.
Right, like, in the future, will we have to decide between paying a rock-bottom price for our daily coffee or paying a premium just for the guarantee that the coffee will actually be there tomorrow?
It's a trade-off we might all have to face.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay insanely curious, and we'll catch you next time.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of Simply Economics. We hope this discussion helped make today's economic concept clearer and more relevant to real life. If you found this episode useful, feel free to share it with others who are interested in understanding economics beyond the textbook. You can find Simply Economics on YouTube, Spotify, and Podbean. In our next episode, we'll continue exploring how economic theory applies to everyday decisions and real-world markets. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Simply Economics.